Welcome back to the Becoming MindStrong podcast, and we are going to close out the season with a little bit of a special episode. And by special, I mean an interesting one for me. I get asked a lot about my backstory, about my background, about how I got into the world of menopause and do what we do. And it's one of those topics that, for me, I'm always like, do people really care about the backstory, or do they just care if we can help them or not? But doing this a long time, you hear repeat questions and you learn what people care about. And it's a question I get asked quite a bit. So today we're going to wrap up this season of the Becoming MindStrong podcast with a special episode of Rachel's backstory. Check it out. So I was born on a warm summer. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to go back that far. But I do want to start the story as far back as fourth grade. And you'll see why that's important in a few minutes here. When I was in fourth grade, my school did a thing where they brought in instruments and, showed you could join the band. And my parents essentially said, pick an instrument. You're joining the band, no questions asked. And I did. I chose the trumpet. I could not tell you why, probably because it was shiny and all the boys were doing it. So I wanted to, being a tomboy, I wanted to show that girls could do it too. And I was terrible. I was terrible at music. I was always, in school band, they do chairs. I was always last chair. I never practiced. I hated it. And fast forward around seventh grade, I got a music teacher who was so much more than a music teacher. He was a former president of the Make-A-Wish International Foundation. His whole thing was that music is a vehicle to give back. And he got me really intrigued at what it could mean to be a musician. And I don't know what he saw in me, because I was still terrible in those days, but he took my parents aside and he's like, look, there is a raw talent here that I think if we chose to develop, Rachel could do really well in music. So I did. I tried it. I started practicing. And lo and behold, thank you, neural connections, the more I practiced, the better that I got. Next thing I knew, music became my life. I practiced hours every day. I'd wake up and practice before school, after school. I started winning all-state competitions. Fast forward a few more years, and I wound up going to, it's called Interlochen Arts Academy, for those who have artistic backgrounds. It's basically the Hogwarts of the arts. So it's a boarding high school in the woods of Michigan. There's nothing there but that school. And it's only for musicians, dancers, visual artists, all artists of all varieties at a high school level. So I wound up going to high school for music. I went to college for music. I got my master's in jazz performance and went on to live in New York City. And I was a jazz musician for about 10 years. Music was my life. At that point, we're talking about from 7th, 8th grade until my late 20s, early 30s-ish. And it was a ton of fun. I could not imagine doing anything else. At this point, this is who I am and what I do, and this was my self-identity. And as I started getting into my 30s, being a jazz musician is a lot of fun until it's not. What I started finding is that the gigs that paid really well were not fun. It was a lot of wedding cocktail hours and playing the same songs over and over again. And the gigs that were a ton of fun, where we got to write our own music and experiment as a band, they didn't pay very well at all, if anything. Sometimes it was like a meal or $50. So I kind of hit this crossroads where I'm like, man, I'm getting into my 30s now. All my friends are settling down, and a couple of them were having kids. And it was just like, do I want this life indefinitely? So I decided to move to South Florida, where a lot of my friends were. I was living in New York at the time, and just see what it felt like to live a more settled life. There's this terrible saying in the music world of those who can't do teach. So going from a performer to a teacher, ego-wise, it's a scary move. But for me, it was like, okay, well, I've proved I can make it as a performer, quote unquote, make it, whatever that means to you. And I knew I loved teaching. I had done part-time teaching the whole time I was a freelance musician. So I was like, let me just try it. Let me try it for a year and see how I feel about teaching. And it was not an easy decision. There were a lot of voices in my brain telling me I was selling out, all the things that come with that. So moved to South Florida, started teaching middle school. The gold in this is that the school I was teaching at hadn't even been built yet. It was a brand new school. So for me, as an entrepreneur in my heart and soul, I got to build it from the ground up. And this is a big part of my background. My parents were business owners. When I was living in New York as a freelance musician, I had founded a nonprofit based around bringing music back to public schools with a friend of mine. Like, I have always had this need to build. My very first business was called Pinecone King. I was in 4th grade and we would go door to door, my best friend and I, selling little pinecone wreaths. So the entrepreneurial spirit is deep. So I go to teach at this brand new school. I get to build their program from scratch. And man, did I fall in love. I loved teaching. I loved building this program. I loved middle school, like taking kids at this weird, awkward age that could be so terrible. And I mean, honestly, 80% of our conversations were just about life, about self-esteem, about the power of choice, about neural connections. We would just nerd out and chat. But I held them to a high bar. And here's why I started this story in 4th grade. I was not the gifted musician who just was born with it in her blood. It's funny because my mom was a pianist, not professionally, but incredible piano player. I did not get those genes. So I really had a soft spot for the kids who struggled, right? The kids who were like, this doesn't come natural to me. It's like, yeah, same. And it's a lesson that I carry with me through this day. I truly believe that the people for whom things just come easy, they get bored. Right? Come easily. They just get bored. When I was at Interlock and I saw people who had always been the best, and over the years, you saw them kind of fall off the radar because they never had to work for it. When we struggle with something, when we're not naturally the best and we have to put blood, sweat, and tears into it, on the other side of it, holy cow, the reward is so much better. And I have the fast forwarding to present day, I have that conversation a lot with women in our Ignite, our signature program, when they're like, I'm struggling with macro tracking. I don't know how to lock this in. I'm like, look, I don't want to say who cares that you're struggling. Like, I care. I want to make it easier. And chances are when you lock this in, you're going to stick with it a lot longer because we had to put some blood, sweat, and tears in there. So anyway, back to Florida. I started teaching middle school, grew this. It got to the point they started using the band program at the school on the radio. They were advertising on the radio, and they would use the program to bring people into the school because we grew it into this big known thing because the kids would perform at Disney World and won all kinds of awards and all kinds of cool stuff. So I went on to teach for about the next decade after that. Quite a few years into teaching, I just needed a release. To this day, I love teaching middle schoolers. I love the reward of the work, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of taking deep breaths. You're in a classroom of 40 middle schoolers at once. It's a lot of taking deep breaths, not losing your cool, reminding yourself they're children, like take a breath. So I just needed somewhere to let off steam at the end of the day. And at the time, I had a really good friend who was super into the gym. So I started going to the gym with her. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I'd been someone who just ate very little, mostly lived off salads, had no idea what I was doing. And this friend drove me nuts to no end because she was even shorter than I am. I'm only 5'4". She was shorter than I am and could lift like a beast. She made me look like the weakest human on earth. And because I tend to have a competitive side about things I care about, I was like, no, this is not going to do. And I got very into the gym very quickly. Being someone, I find that people who are very goal-oriented, who raise that bar a lot, right? We tend to like weight training because you get to see those numbers go up, and it's a good carrot to follow. So I got very into the gym very quickly. I was not consistent in the beginning. Sometimes I'd go hardcore. Sometimes I'd take weeks off. My body was not showing any results. I didn't know anything about nutrition. So in the beginning, I was working my butt off and nothing was changing. At some point, the pendulum swung because my friend was like, you just have to eat more. You just have to eat more. I didn't know what that meant. So then I just started eating a ton and got a little fluffy on the other side. And I just learned by doing. I just kind of jumped in the deep end. And then it hit a point where I was like, you know what? Like, I want to actually learn about this stuff. I'm going to be putting all this time in. I'm pretty into it now. Like, I'm an educator. I love learning. Let me learn about it. So I started doing some research. And the more I learn, if you listen to my content, you hear me use the word flabbergasted in any story related to this. And I think it'll forever be my word because the more flabbergasted I became, the more I learned about this industry. Because when you understand how nutrition works as a skill, it's not that complicated. It still takes time, right? There's a difference between simple and easy, right? It is not you snap your fingers, you lose weight. But you understand that all of these point systems and these shake systems and these diets, like they are a very well packaged, pretty pink bow on things you don't actually need. What you need is to understand nutrition as a skill. So when I started to learn that, I was like, man, this is gross. Like, this is disgusting what's going on in this industry. So I didn't think about doing anything with it. I just continued on my journey. And as I started to lock things in, my body started to show. I started to lose weight. My muscles started showing. And soon, just organically, a lot of my teacher friends would come up to me in the hallway, or even teachers I didn't know that well. And they'd be like, man, I wish I could get in shape, but I have no idea what to do, or I'm intimidated, or I keep going from diet to diet and nothing's working. And at that point, like, MindStrong was not even a twinkle in my eye. I was just like, well, I'm going to the gym anyway. Do you want to come with me? I'll just show you what to do. So I started bringing a few teachers to the gym. I would give them some tips. And the way I will forever tell this part of the story is it was almost selfish. The feedback that I heard from these women were things like, I have avoided mirrors for the past 10 years, and I found myself catching a glimpse and like double checking my booty this morning. Or a big one that I heard from multiple people was every time my husband would just like walk by and put his arm around me or like touch me, I would cringe because I was afraid he felt some kind of roll. And I noticed recently that I'm walking around with more confidence and I'm leaning in instead of out when he touches me. And selfishly, I was like, that is what I want to do. That is what I want to help every woman do. So at this point, when I was teaching, it was not just teaching. I was doing before school clubs. I was doing after school clubs. I had a 45 minute to an hour commute to work. Like, this was like a 12-hour day. My life was leave the house at 5 a.m, work however many hours, 10 hours, go straight to the gym, come home, get my stuff ready for the next day, go to bed. Like, life was a lot. It was packed. So in between that packed schedule, I decided, why don't I just start a little thing on the side? Like, I'm taking these teacher friends to the gym anyway. What if I just started charging people and doing, some in-person training, and I can teach them a thing or two about the skill of nutrition? So I started doing that. I started taking some teacher friends to the gym, making a couple bucks off of it, doing some more structured individual in-person coaching. And very quickly, I realized that was not what I wanted to do. Like, I loved the feedback. I loved helping them, but I wanted to make a big impact. I wanted to cut through the noise in the nutrition industry, and I wasn't going to be able to do that one by one by one, right? Because if you're working one-on-one, your time's limited. Even if you helped 10 people in a day, if you worked a 10-hour day, that's 10 people. Whereas I knew if I worked online, I could help 5,000 people in that same hour. The thing is, this is pre-COVID, so online nutrition was not a thing yet. There were a handful of people doing it, but it was not a thing. I remember even talking to people in the early stages of like, I think I'm going to switch to online coaching. And I had people say to me, like, what is that? Isn't that a thing? I cannot tell you how many people said to me, that seems risky. Maybe you should keep doing in-person training just in case. And there was something in my gut that was like, no, this is the way that it's going. This is what I want to do. I would rather just stay teaching middle school. I don't want to do in-person training, but there was something in my gut that was like, this is what we're going to do. Real quickly, the biggest event in MindStrong history is coming up, and you are hearing about it first. From March 3rd through 5th, 2026, I am hosting my Runway to Summer Metabolism Boosting Challenge. It is totally free, and it is going to be the biggest event that we have ever done in the history of MindStrong. You can go to www.mindstrongfitness.com/challenge, or just use the link in the show notes below to reserve your spot. I cannot wait. I will see you there. Now, let's get back to the episode. So on my lunch breaks, quote unquote, if you're a teacher, you don't actually have a lunch break, right? You're making copies with one hand, shoving food in your mouth with the other. But somewhere in there, I started building out a website. I'd get home and just burn the midnight oil and do all that. And started slowly introducing this concept of training people online. Back in those days, it was Skype, not Zoom. So I would work with people one-to-one, and we'd be on Skype. And Ignite, which is now, as of the time I'm recording this, we're a team of 45. It is a very well-oiled machine. Back in the day, it was a one-page PDF that linked to YouTube videos. It's very cute to look back on. And I just started by starting. This is another little life lesson that I love is you just start just by starting, right? So many people never start because they're so worried about it being perfect. When you can just embrace the mess, just know it's going to suck in the beginning and just start. And from there, we can have trust in ourselves, right? We are intelligent women. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get better. So just freaking start, because the end version is not going to be the same as the first version. So I did, and I was doing both for a while. I was doing online coaching while I was teaching. It was a lot, but I loved it. I felt lit up every single day. And then here's where the story, this is one of my favorite parts of the story. I'd been doing this for probably about 2-3 years at this point. I was doing MindStrong very, very part-time, still teaching. And I knew what we had here. I knew that if I could put my time, focus, and energy on MindStrong, I could blow this up into a full-fledged business. But it was scary because at this point I had left South Florida. I was still teaching, but I was now teaching in California. So a teacher in California makes 6 figures, or at least the school that I was in. I was making 6 figures as a teacher in California. And MindStrong at the time was making probably about $20,000 to $30,000 a year. Okay, so this means my salary would go from 6 figures to not $20,000 to $30,000 a year, because that was the cost of the business making. That was what the business made. I wasn't making a salary at that point. And finally, I was like, you know what? Screw it. Like, life is short. I don't want to look back with regrets. I want to know that I gave this my all. I'm putting in my notice. And I will never forget, this is a 30-second story, but behind the scenes, to this day, all these years later, this was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. There are no words. The amount of therapy sessions I had and business coaching sessions I had and venting to friends, this was scary. I sat down with my then principal. I told her how much I love working there, how much I appreciate it, and I'm going to go all in on my business, and this will be my last school year. About literally a month after that conversation, COVID hit. So COVID hits, the world shuts down, and my principal comes back to me and she says, hey, I know that you made the decision to quit teaching. We're going to be fully remote for a while. How would you feel if we kept you on your salary, you get to keep all your benefits, and you teach a few hours a day online? And let me tell you, talk about the universe throwing out a safety net. I now had the time, space, capacity to go all in on MindStrong, sans a few hours a day online where I would still get to keep salary, benefits, all of the above. Thank you, universe. So I did. I had a very cushy situation where I got to do both. I was teaching online a few hours. The rest of my day was spent with MindStrong. That was a temporary thing because once they went back to school, that was gone. But check out what happened. MindStrong grew 450% in that year. Why? Because where focus goes, energy flows, right? When I was able, that's a Tony Robbins line, when I was able to put everything into MindStrong, the results spoke for themselves. And talk about following your gut. Online coaching was not really a thing, except for those handful of people doing it. If I had listened to all the people saying, isn't that scary? Shouldn't you keep doing in person? I wouldn't have done it. MindStrong also blew up because in a world now, a COVID world where everyone was scrambling to try to figure out the online space and how do I do online coaching and gyms are shut down, I already had a company. I already had a brand. So we just took off. Now, I wish that was the end of the story, and and here we are all these years later. We flourished during COVID from a business perspective. On the other side of COVID, however, the online world changed drastically. Back when I started online, again, barely anyone was doing it. So I put out a workshop or a free challenge or whatever else, and people in the online space were like, holy cow, this person's offering us free content online? Yes, I'm going to sign up. Post-COVID, everyone was doing that. Right now it's, another free online workshop? Yeah, what are you selling us? And we started to not just flatline, but we started dipping significantly. And I will tell you, I am not someone who carries a lot of stress in general. I think I do a really good job of zooming out and seeing life in general. And, will this matter when I'm 99? All the stuff we talk about in the podcast. Those were hard days. I describe them as waking up with an elephant on my chest every morning, because at that point, as we grew and as we built a team and as we had more business expenses, it wasn't just me anymore, right? It wasn't this fun little side project. This was my only source of income. I had team members that relied on this income. We were used to helping X number of women, and that was dwindling, and it was scary, man. That was stressful. So that went on for a while. I tried to just beat a dead horse and keep doing the same stuff, and it wasn't working. And this, if I had to throw in third life lesson here, this one's more for entrepreneurs, but I'm sure if you dig in, you could find this to relate to most areas of life. The reason I believe that most entrepreneurs don't make it is because the moments that you have to do the scary stuff are the moments where it feels the absolute worst. And here's what I mean by that. I was now in a time period where we're nosediving. Cash is not there, right? It's hard to breathe. I'm waking up with an elephant in my chest, and I'm like, well, I can either keep doing what I've been doing and it's not working, like we've done this long enough to know now it's not working, or I can bite the bullet and I can spend money that I don't have at the worst time possible where we're hemorrhaging cash, and I can figure it out and hire a new coach that's going to help me figure out how to do this. And that is the breaking point. That is the decision point that most people won't make. Most people say, well, I don't have the money right now. Business is nosediving. How am I supposed to invest? Well, then you're going to go out of business, right? Math is always going to math. It's those moments where it's scariest to jump off the cliff that you have to freaking jump. You don't have to. You could just keep living the same life. But if you want to live the life of your dreams, you have to jump when it feels scariest. And go back and listen to the Fear podcast. That's one of my favorite ones. So I did. I hired a couple new coaches, and one particular new coach. And then from him, I met our current marketing team. I met everyone else who's most of the people in the business now. Game changer. In the next year, we grew 650%. We went from nosediving to a multi-million-dollar business in that 1 year. At this point, at the time that I'm recording this, we are a team of 45 and counting. It's like literally as I'm recording this podcast, we're hiring in new coaches, so that's gonna increase. We have, man, it's a weird thing to think back on that one-page PDF of Ignite. It was a one-woman show. I mean, we now have a director of coaching who leads our team of 30 coaches. We hired in a COO this year, so it's like taking your child and not just sending them off to kindergarten, but maybe even sending them off to college, right? You lose that control, but you're so proud to see what this baby has grown up into. That's very much what it feels like. So I look back on all of that, and it's a wild ride, man, but there is a common thread through all of it. Like, the reason I started this conversation in fourth grade is because I truly, truly believe if I hadn't struggled with music early on, I don't know that I would be the business owner that I am today. Because I learned grit, I learned tenacity, I learned how to sit my butt in a practice room for 4 to 6 hours at a time and focus and grind and give myself brain breaks when I need it and then get back to work. Like, all the stuff that you have to do to grow a successful business, I learned through music, and I learned by not being very good at it in the beginning. And now, again, as the time I'm recording this, like, my whole drive, my whole mission is to streamline processes so no one has to learn the hard way. That's what Ignite is. Ignite is my backstory of being like, how do I do this, right? How do I work out properly? How do I stop being injured all the time? What do I do with nutrition? Why is this so confusing? To me, I'm like, let me just put together a program that I wish I had when I started so we can condense time and get you from A to C as quickly as possible. Now, just in this past year, I launched a second business called Her Fit Biz, where I teach online female coaches to build and scale and grow their own online company. Same thing. It took me a long time of trial and error and nosedives and recovering to learn what you actually need to grow a multi-million-dollar business and scaling from there. And I started that company for the same reason. Like, oh, it doesn't have to be that hard. Let me just streamline A to C for you so you can condense time and start scaling and start helping more women faster. There's a saying that says the thing you struggle with the most becomes the thing you're most passionate about teaching. And that is life motto. I think looking back on my story, obviously there's a lot more to the past 40 some years than that. But looking back on my life story, that's a lot of what it was. It was a lot of head down, hands in the dirt, blood, sweat, tears, figure this out. And now looking back on it, I'm like, man, there were easier ways to do things. And if there's one service I can provide for this world in the time I'm here, is I know my superpower is educating. Let me take all the lessons I learned the hard way and streamline them so that everyone else doesn't have to learn the hard way. So here we are, present day. As of the time I'm recording this, I am living in Denver, Colorado. I am loving it and just so excited about where MindStrong is, where MindStrong's heading. We're bringing in, again, this will change by the time probably this podcast gets released, but last month we brought in over 150 new women in 1 month. That number will double in the months ahead. We have a powerhouse team of coaches. We have a powerhouse team of admin. I pinch myself, literally pinch myself. I cannot believe the life I get to live. I remember my teacher days where my dream, I would love to just be able to sit at my kitchen counter and have a cup of coffee before work. That was my dream. Now, I mean, if you're watching the video here, it's not true I have jeans on right now, but some days I have pajama pants on the bottom because you can't see, right? Talk about living a dream life. And it didn't come easy. It came from taking a lot of risks. It came from saying, you know what, I'm going to jump and I'm going to trust that the universe has me. Whatever you call the universe, maybe the trust is just in yourself, but I know that I believe in me. I believe in the universe. I know that it might not be smooth sailing, but I'm not going to stop till it happens. So let me just leap. Let me just face the fear and do it anyway. And that's why we're here. So thank you for listening. As I mentioned in the intro, it's a little odd for me to talk about my story, but I do get asked a lot. So I don't want to say that's a highlight reel because there were some lows in there, but that's the Cliff Notes version is how I'll put it. So I hope you enjoyed this season, not just this episode, but this season of the Becoming MindStrong podcast. And thank you for being here. And I will see you next season. I am hosting the largest event we have ever done in MindStrong history, and you don't want to miss it. From March 3rd through 5th, 2026, join me live on Zoom, totally free, for MindStrong's Runway to Summer, my 3-day metabolism boosting challenge. To join and for more details, go to www.mindstrongfitness.com/challenge or just use the link in the show notes below.